it's recording for real this time. From the industrial wastelands of Michigan to the fruited plains of Iowa, this is the American Wheat Factory.
You are the dead. Remain exactly where you are. Make no move until you are ordered.
We burn them to ashes and then burn the ashes. That's our official motto.
Now we can see you. Clasp your hands behind your heads. Stand out in the middle of the room. Stand back to back.
Who can explain the fascination of fire? What draws us to it, whether we're young or old?
Here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes a chopper to chop off your head.
And welcome to the American Wheat Factory podcast. This is Nathan.
And this is Conlon.
Exciting show for you tonight. Happy New Year, everyone.
Yep, our New Year's Day show.
No.
2022-0101.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a great year. I can feel it. Or not. I don't know. It could be. I don't hold a lot to that. It's like,
it could be a great new generation or the fall of man. Whatever. I mean, either way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the world as we know it could end, or not. So who knows? But yeah. So here we are. The new year. It is upon us.
Yeah, I didn't do anything for New Year's.
I was asleep by 12:30. I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I just don't do things like that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do I want to get really drunk? I mean, yeah, kind of, but I got other things I want to do more.
Like, it's not like there's like cool stuff going on New Year's. It's just like you either have a party, you don't. There's nothing good on TV.
Yeah. Yeah, you're just watching like weird stuff on TV, waiting for midnight to see. You know, I'm always waiting, especially since 9/11. Whenever I see that ball drop in New York, I'm waiting for the TV screen to turn white and then some anchors to cut in. We lost feed from our affiliates. We don't know what happened. It's like, oh, they finally did it. They nuked it. I mean, I don't hope that happens, but it's always in the back of my mind. It's like, yeah, someday something crazy is going to happen around that event. I mean, they don't have to do it now. Now there's just disease everywhere again. So,
but I guess it's less infectious. I guess that's why they changed the waiting period on it.
Oh yeah, I've heard it's less. It doesn't attack the lungs as bad or something.
Well, it's why they
out in the news.
Yeah, it's something like it's the Omicron's the most prevalent one right now, and the thing is that it's the time to when you're actually infectious, if you have it, is the window for it is so small that's why they changed the guidelines for it.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
because there's literally some people like they've like tested them and like they'll be like the test would be positive 1 hour and negative the next hour and then negative after that. It's like, oh, you're infectious for an hour or whatever.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's different for different people, but yeah. But that's I don't know. That was a medical explanation for why they changed it. Who knows? I don't know what conspiracy are. It's like, we can't stop the wheels of commerce once again. It must move forward.
I was listening to this one doctor talking today saying, well, eventually, because he was like, so what do you think of next year? And he's like, well, we never know what it's going to mutate into, but he said this will just be like a shot you get with your flu shot in a couple of years. It's like, it's never going away. It's always going to be moving around, but it's going to become more seasonal. And they said because of something about how it's structured, it's like eventually it'll die off in like 10 years or something once no one can get it anymore. But then it's like it'll always be around like the third world and stuff, and you'll have to get a seasonal COVID shot and a seasonal flu shot and your herpes shot and your whatever other shot.
Or if you're going to another country, you get all those cool shots.
Yeah, where they just line up needles on a table. Are you which arms? Yeah, there's 15 going in both arms.
Yeah, there. Yeah, it was the Drew guy from Giant Bomb. Does his own. Actually, he's working for a video game company now, doing video stuff. Anyways, he'd always go to crazy places, and he'd always have to get like crazy shots to go to another country.
Oh yeah.
Here's your anti-parasitic. This is gonna knock you out for a couple days.
Remember when back when Vice was cool, like 5 or 7 years ago?
Yeah.
One guy was running it. What's his name? Shane Smith or whatever. He was talking about going to places like crazy places in Africa to do news stories, and what were the parasites they would get? Because they can't really give you a shot for them, but they can treat you for them once you come back home. But they're it's like, what are they called? Like bullhead intestinal worms, or it's something horrifying.
Yeah.
That like everyone in that country has, and it doesn't bother them, but they'll kill you because you weren't born with them. And oh yeah, they came back and had to get treated for this, and it's like, oh yeah, they don't die naturally in your body. They're gonna come out once they're dead, and you're just like shitting out worms for a week. It's like, oh, I would never go to a place where oh, when you come home you shit worms. Oh no, thank you. Yeah, that was like in when they were. A lot of those things are in like Africa. They have real bad parasites there.
Yeah.
Because they get in through your feet and stuff. Like it's weird. It's like you don't eat them; they're just on the ground, and you walk around, and they can get in through your feet. And,
Yeah, it's like hookworms. That's how that works.
Just nightmare shit. Like no. Nope.
And it's hard to fight parasites because they are a living organism. So it's
they're
to fight them, you have to fight your own body. It's essentially, it's kind of like fighting cancer almost.
Well, like the stuff you put on your dog's back for fleas, like when you get that, biannual flea stuff.
Yeah.
That liquid you put on them, they tell you don't let your dog swim in the pond. It's like, well, why not? Oh, because once he has that shit in his system, if any of it's left on his fur, it'll kill all the life in a pond. Like, what is that crap? We get it on our hands when we put it on our dog. And it's like, oh yeah, that's a very I forget what the anti-flea treatment is, but it's based on some kind of really powerful anti-pest thing they put on crops. And it's like, yeah, if your dog still has any of that on his coat, which will be on there for a long time, it's like, yeah, let him go swim in the pond, and then everything in the pond will die. I don't know how big a body of water they're talking about. Because it's like, well, if you let one go in Lake Michigan, are all the fish going to die? I mean, what are we talking about here?
What's the thing they used to like spray on kids in the 50s?
For what?
I don't know. I just remember that it was like they'd have like, like the street sweeper trucks, they'd look like that, but they'd go around and they just like spray this chemical like over the place for some reason, and like kids would line up like spray me, and it was basically like some chemical that was supposed to protect you from something. I can't remember what it's called. It's like, oh wait, no, it's DDT. That's it.
Oh yeah,
that's what that's what the wrestling move is named after.
Yeah, it's DDT is the ultimate crop protector. The only problem is all the birds die because some component in it makes the egg shells like paper thin when they lay eggs, and they just die. Like, we would have wiped out, if we kept using that, we would have wiped out all the species because it's wildly effective. I mean, the thing is with all that shit is like it works, but it's like there's this downstream effects of like, well, it's like all the lakes, large bodies of water in Michigan, especially when you get into like mid Michigan, they're all filled with the byproducts of making Teflon, because it was all made here and they just poured it into the water system because they thought it was just a waste product. PTFE or whatever they call it. It's like guaranteed cancer, and it's like, oh, it pollutes all our water systems here. Because Dow Chemical, when they started making Teflon in the 50s or whatever, it's like, yeah, just dump it in the water when you're done, just coat the pans with it. That's why I use like cast iron ceramic coated pans from France and other places, because it's like they're horribly expensive, but if you take care of them, which means you clean them by hand and you heat them properly, they'll last forever.
Yeah,
they'll last for like 100 years. But yeah, I don't have any coated pans anymore at all. I got rid of all that shit. It's like, oh, we're just gonna hand wash this stuff after we're done. Sorry, because it's either that or colon cancer. What do you want?
Yeah, if those only vaguely related, just chemicals, or actually it's an element, but they were talking about like how helium, we're basically going to run out of helium.
Yeah.
Or if we haven't run out of it already. And I thought I swore we could make helium, but I guess we can't.
There's an extraction process that's very
helium
to the planet.
Well, there's like so basically like fracking or natural gas fracking, or if that's what they do that for. Anyways, some natural gas element of digging it up out of the ground, whatever horrible thing you have to do to get that. One of the byproducts is helium.
Yeah. So we'll have helium because fracking never stops.
Well, the interesting thing is like the most abundant thing in the universe is helium and hydrogen.
Yep.
And so our atmosphere used to be full of it, but because we're close to the sun, the way that reacted to the heat, the helium and hydrogen flew away from the atmosphere.
Right.
So if you look at like Saturn and Jupiter, those are gas giants. That's all helium and hydrogen in there.
Yep. So we can just go get it from there.
Yeah. Just go pick it up. Just scoop a bucket of it up. Escape the atmosphere or the gravity pull.
Yeah, the core of Jupiter, which weighs like 1/10 of what the sun does. Like it's this tremendously heavy core.
I don't know about. I don't know. So some people speculate that like whatever the core of Jupiter is basically like what Earth would be.
Yeah, in size.
Maybe. Yeah,
but it's like it's metal hydrogen or something. It's crazy.
Yeah,
they speculate on how dense it would have to be to retain the giant around.
Oh, okay.
It's like it has to be something like the densest thing you can imagine, which is just like metallic hydrogen and stuff. It's under so much pressure. Because like Venus is basically a planet like ours, but it's just too close to the sun to support life and has a very thick atmosphere.
Yeah,
it's essentially like we understand Venus, or Mars is like that's something we understand. Gas giants are bizarre because it's just some dense core that holds all that gas together.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Venus is that like it's like if you could build a floating city there, people could live on Venus.
Yeah.
Because the upper atmosphere has because one of the is just the atmospheric pressure. So like when you're on Earth, it's one atmosphere. So the upper atmosphere of Venus is one atmosphere.
It's just planet side. It's like 300 atmospheres.
And it's like full like sulfur or whatever. So
yeah, it's just acid.
Yeah.
Remember those probes the Russians sent, the Venera 1, Venera 2, where you saw pieces of them falling off? So they sent a few pictures. The Russians have had weird probe problems.
Yeah.
They've always had the probes that die. Because we sent Viking there.
Have you ever seen like the original pictures of that mission before they got cleaned up?
Yeah, it's
impossible. Yeah, you can't tell anything that's going on. So who knows if that's even like what it actually looks like. But hey, I guess it's close enough, I guess. I don't know. It's like when people show it's like, this is what a black hole looks like, and it's just kind of like a weird red circle, half circle thing. And it's like, wait, is that where we're looking at it? It's like, no, that's the computer's interpretation of it. It's like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. I was expecting more. I know this is a scientific endeavor that's really important, but that just looks kind of lame to me.
You better special effects now.
Well, I hear like a part of that project to detail out a black hole is like some of the math that goes into that went into making the black hole for Interstellar.
Probably. Interstellar always seemed pretty close to it's like, oh, it's wild shit, but it's like, how can we make it as close to real as possible? And you look at the story, it's like, well, you can't, but you can. If you're willing to accept some things, it's like, yeah, Interstellar works on that level. Yeah, unlike like the black hole from Walt Disney, which is about my level of science. It's like, yeah, sure, why not?
But we did have that satellite that like flew through like the aura of the sun or whatever.
Yeah.
That was cool.
And then we have the satellite we just launched. That
the telescope or whatever it is.
The most powerful telescope ever built. And it like we put it into orbit, and it still has. What did the guy from? Because I'm subscribed to the NASA Facebook, and it's like it only has 500 more program moves to make before it's ready to move 100 million miles away from Earth and start working. It's like it has to be really far away from us to.
Oh, I didn't know. I thought that was just going to be in the atmosphere. I didn't know it was going to be moving away.
No, it's going to be very, very deep. It's what they call deep orbit, or yeah, they don't want.
Or they're just going to shove it out like Voyager.
No, it will stop at a certain point so we can reliably relay information to it. It's the James Webb telescope.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a reason it costs billions of dollars. But they say like the Hubble was amazing once they got it working. It's like, oh, this will really be amazing. And it's mostly the stuff you're going to see from it is it's not an optical telescope. It's more of a gamma telescope, where it's doing it's going to reconstruct what it sees through waves and shit like that. I don't.
Okay.
It gets beyond me, but it's not like it's not going to. You're going to see amazing images from it, but they will again be passed through a computer and interpreted for the human eye.
Yeah. That's what it is anyway. Because like, yeah, I don't know, you ever what do they call those, like the pillars of something, where it's like those gas giants that are kind of like have
the star forge where all the stars are made and stuff.
Yeah, and so if you point a telescope out of it, you won't see that.
No.
Because it's what it is. It's like it's taking light in and basically adding light all the time from the same place until eventually it's like, okay, we've accumulated all the light we can and we combine that into one image.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily what it looks like to the human eye. That's just like if you just get enough visual information and it's combined together, that's what it looks like. So
that's why everyone who builds those has PhD after their name. It's literally like what they say at one time. NASA was it's like the 200 smartest people in the world, measurably smartest people in the world worked at NASA or something. Like I know at one time it was an insane brain trust, but then other countries started their own space programs, and they kind of like because that was just the best people in the world you could find. They all came to NASA because NASA was the best funded thing. And I mean, it was Nazis that put us on the moon. It wasn't just Werner von Braun. There was a lot of other people too, because they understood rocketry and practical application better than anyone else. It's not like it was only Nazis. It's like they were the only people that made it into a weapon and spent a fortune to do it. Like we didn't do that shit because we were too busy. How do we build 50,000 bombers? Like that's what we were doing. They were sending ineffectively, though terrifying, poorly guided weapons at the UK and stuff, while we were building, how fast can we build bombers? Because all those German wonder weapons were like scary, but they were ultimately too little too late. And the ones that would have been really effective, we incidentally bombed because we were just carpet bombing the country. Like, oh yeah, they would have had that, but we bombed the factory that made the thing. So, or we bombed the secret site where they could launch like 100 V2 rockets within an hour. So we like incidentally bombed that. I think we meant to go after that one, but there was other things we bombed where it's like, oh yeah, this is why they never had an effective nuclear program, because we bombed all the facilities that they could even approach that research on. But the Nazis were never close to a nuclear bomb. They could have been, but thank God they didn't. They would have used the shit out of those.
Yeah, before they knew the consequences of it.
Oh, they wouldn't care. I mean, they probably wouldn't have used. I mean, let's see if the Nazis.
Because they would have just used it like on Russia.
Yeah, they would have just used it on Russians. They would have just like incinerated the Red Army.
And then it would just come back at them. They're like, oops.
Yeah. Because we knew a lot more about that than we ever said. But yeah, if they start using them, we just pull our troops back to like France and be like, what do we do? Just wait.
But I mean, I don't know how many they could effectively use, because like, it took us like years to make 2 of them.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is it took the Manhattan Project took all the resources in America and the world, because there was a British component to that too, and other countries' components, and Germans we captured also helped the Manhattan Project, and they it took the most productive country in World War II. It took a massive amount of resources to make, maybe 5 functioning devices. And then when we used them, it was like, what if they don't surrender? How many more do we got? Or can we use them on the Russians? It's like, oh, we only got like 2 or 3 more. And those were the ones we didn't think would work. So, I thought we had hundreds of these. Like, no, we don't have that many.
Yeah. That was the era. Yeah, like I told you before, the era of big science.
Yeah.
Now it's just all on a computer, but back then you'd have to build like a giant infrastructure to like enrich uranium just a little bit better.
And then Edward Teller came along. It's like, if you inject tritium in that, you get a 3-stage explosion. And Oppenheimer was like, that would be hundreds of megatons. That'd be really destructive. But Edward Teller was like, yes.
It's a rational solution.
Well, it's like, because no one's going to use this shit. If it's that, like your bombs you dropped on Hiroshima and Tokyo, even if they're 20% more effective, countries will use the hell out of them. But if they're 1,000 times more effective, you're going to think twice about that. Mainly because you just poison the planet you live on. Now they say there's like they've reached like some next level with that. It's like, oh no. It's like all the blast, none of the radiation. It's like, well, okay, we know where this is going.
Isn't that just a gamma bomb?
No, it's there's a few different ways to.
Well, that was always the hope of the gamma bomb, is like it's just gamma radiation which can go through anything, and it would just kill all the humans but leave all the infrastructure.
Yeah, they call those neutron bombs. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The problem with those is it took like 100% or 200% more nuclear fuel for a bomb that really only had the blast radius of like a Hiroshima type bomb. Because it produced a massive radioactive effect, but it wasn't as effective. You didn't get all the heat and blast that you got from a hydrogen bomb. So that's one of the reasons they quit using them. The other one was you didn't just irradiate those areas and it just dissipated on the wind. They stayed irradiated. It's like, well, we didn't blow the city up, but no one can get. It'd become like every other city in Europe would be like Moria. Like you don't dare go there. It's like you don't go to Berlin. It's like, why? The city's standing. It's like, yeah, it's 1,000% radiation too. The concrete's starting to break down from the radioactivity. No, the stuff they're playing with now is like, how can they enhance the fusion aspect of the second stage to where it just it like becomes a pure fusion type device with very little residual radiation. Or then compressing hydrogen into metal, which has been achieved by an American guy and an Indian guy. Like they finally did it with magnets. Those are those ones that Alistair Reynolds talked about in his book. It was just science fiction when he wrote about it. They were called foam phase munitions. You just basically compressed hydrogen to where it looked like foam, but it was metal. And you use that in a magnetic field, and then you just turn the field off, and all the energy of the hydrogen would be suddenly released. And it wouldn't. But that's like antimatter. It's like anything that's. The thing with nuclear bombs is it takes chemical explosives and things happening to trigger them. They don't just go off by themselves. But yeah, if you're just containing something in a magnetic field and then turning it off and then it becomes deadly, that's called a failed deadly detonation system. You don't want that. If the containment breaks down in the silo or something, then you're fucked. And we can't make antimatter yet.
Then it just becomes Ghostbusters, but with nuclear weapons.
Yeah, pretty much.
Shut it down now. Don't do that.
Yeah, shut down the electromagnetic containment around the metallic hydrogen. And when I say they compress it, I mean they compress something about the size of the head of a pin for like 3 seconds, like that. And that was 5 years ago. So who knows what they're doing now?
I mean, the Hadron Collider creates micro black holes, and that's, when we talk about it like that, it's like, that seems dangerous. It's like, yeah, but it's cool as shit.
It's dangerous but necessary.
We need to learn. Helps us make better fuel sources.
Or people have the argument, it's like, well, that's in Sweden. It's like, yeah, a micro black hole will only affect Sweden on the Earth. The rest of us will be fine, right? They say the Mandela, you've heard of the Mandela effect, right?
Which one's that?
Where people remember things that aren't true, but they definitely remember them. It's like, because some people remember Mandela died in prison, and other people remember he's like, no, he was the president of South Africa. He ended apartheid or was part of the political movement to end it. And other people are like, no, he died in prison. And there's people that adamantly believe that. That's why it's called the Mandela effect. And there's all kinds of things like that where people misremember stuff. And then the internet gets involved.
I thought that was something where it's like you never heard of something, and then all of a sudden you like hear a bunch about it. I thought that was the Mandela effect, or that could be a different one.
Like it could. I mean, the name origin is the example I use.
Yeah.
There's the Berenstain Bears versus the Bernstein Bears, all that, and two people remember two things differently, even though they ostensibly grew up in the same country at the same time. It's like, why are you not remembering that? It's because, and they say, well, that didn't start happening until they started the Large Hadron Collider. So what we've done is created two parallel universes here that are intersecting where things are slightly another one, and people don't remember things right. It's all bullshit, but man, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
It's like, this isn't provable, but it's an interesting thought experiment.
Yeah, it was the other one I heard the other day, which I never heard of before, but it was funny. It's called like Hanlon's Razor or something like that, and it's not like a scientific thing. It's just a philosophical idea that like, don't attribute anything to malice which you can attribute to stupidity.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's not all a conspiracy. Sometimes it's just incompetence.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few different ideas about. It's like, oh, no one ever heard of the Mandela effect before that. It's like, wait a minute, I don't know. But then you go try to like, when was it first mentioned? And it's like, it gets really vague. But I don't think we created overlapping universes here, or we did. It's like, it's the plot of Donnie Darko every day.
Just cultural deja vu.
Yeah.
Wait, do I know that?
Well, it's not anything important. Like, did Hitler win or lose World War II? Like, we don't have those. We're debating like obscure things. Like, everyone knows Mandela was in prison for 20 years, which is a quarter of your life wasted in prison. And it's like, oh no, he died there. It's like, no, he was the president of South Africa after the end of apartheid. That was his whole political movement. No, he died in prison, and they just, they honored him with that. It's like, no, he's listed as. But some people are like, yeah, he died in prison. It's like, no, he didn't.
I forget the other one, the whatever effect that people throw around a lot. It's about like people who are stupid or like way more confident than their jobs and they have any right to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's called the Peter Principle, whereas you promote people up to their level of incompetence. No, it's a legitimate like business. You learn that in business school. That's not like a philosophical thing. It's just like you move the guy up until he starts doing damage, and it's like, okay, that's as far as he can go. But sometimes if those guys are driven by ego, the Peter Principle goes out the window, and you end up with lunatics running your company. Because they tried to do a study once to prove whether CEOs of large corporations all over the world had more sociopathic tendencies than regular people. And unfortunately, they found out it's like, no, most of them are normal people that just rose high into their position. Now, they behave like sociopaths, but the sad part of it was you can't attribute special evil to them. They are just doing their job. Like, it's like, it would be great if we could be like, see, they're different from us. They're the reason the world's screwed up. It's like, oh no, there's not all the people that were guards at the concentration camps were evil demonic monsters. They were just doing their job. They were doing a horrible job, but to their minds, it's like, just someone's got to make the donuts. So we always try to attribute like deep horror and darkness to every bad thing. It's like, no, there must be evil behind it. It's like, no, there's just people that have no moral compass at all. They're not doing it for pleasure. Like, that's a psycho that gets pleasure out of that stuff. But people are like, okay, we have to kill X amount of people in X amount of time, so we're going to do this chart, and it's like X amount of resources to kill Y amount of people equals this much manpower, and that's all. They don't think about the implications of what they're doing. They don't. And they have to block that deliberately. Like, that's not just again, they would be psychopaths if they never thought about it. Like, they thought about it. The reason they found those guys with like gold and jewels and diamonds stuffed in their pants is they knew they had to get away when the war was over. It's like, oh no, we're gonna burn for this. Yeah, they weren't like, what do you mean? You know, there were a few of them that were, but not a majority of them. Which is more disconcerting, because if you could prove they were all evil, it's like, see, just it's evil. I'm not capable of that. You know, no one's capable of that. Just crazy people. Like, nope, unfortunately not. It's more bookkeepers are responsible for that.
Unfortunately, anybody can be evil, whether they intend to or not.
With enough financial motivation, people are capable of almost anything.
I'm going to save the world. Wait, I destroyed the world? Oh no.
Well, and it's never an individual thing. It's what do they call that? Like institutional momentum. Like, if you just put 5 guys in charge of the Holocaust and the people doing the work were a bunch of robots, those 5 guys would be completely insanely evil, because it's like, oh, we're reflecting individually, like, we're telling the machines to do this. They have no volition of their own. They're just following our orders. Our orders are fucking evil. You'd have to find madmen. When you have 4 million people involved in it, it's like, well, they're not all crazy. They all know what the hell's going on, but they're not. They find some way to psychologically, like, oh, I just do the payroll, or I just assign the trains to come in, or, you know, I just read names off a list. I don't know what happens to them afterwards. You know, goddamn good and well what's happening to them. But it's just like, well, it's, you know, I'm not the one pulling the lever. So that's what the whole thing about, like, executions, when they have the guys, there's 3 guys pushing 3 buttons and only one of them sends the electricity or the injection in, or the guy's doing the firing squad where every other rifle has a blank in it, so nobody knows they're actually who's responsible for it. It's like, it's a psychological game.
Yeah,
like everyone who's there is responsible for it.
Well, it's like in that On Killing book, where it's like it talks about how most deaths in a war are attributed to artillery fire.
Yeah,
and the guys in the artillery groups, like, they lead much more normal lives compared to infantry guys, or the frontline infantry guys, because even though they're kind of up in the shit, they aren't directly killing people that they can see. They're killing people they don't see. And so when they walk upon, they're like, oh, here's all the guys they killed. They don't connect that, so they can have this disconnect and kind of lead normal lives. Whereas guys where, like, they had to, like, empathize with somebody they're killing and they can see them, like, that's what fucked a lot of people up in wars.
Yeah. Well, I like how the people were, the number of people, like the statistics of people, like just regular infantry soldiers. The World War II was studied closely, but other wars too, where they just fired like in the general direction, or they kind of knew the gun was a little high, but they're like, well, I'm just trying to get them to stop shooting at me. It's like, get their heads down. You know, there was a lot of that. Whereas just like walking up to people and hosing them down, that didn't happen as much as it did. But then the army, of course, worked to get those numbers down. It's like World War I to World War II to Vietnam. It's like, we got to get these numbers way down because this is costing us a fortune.
Yeah, because it was like something in World War II. It was like 50% of people are basically pulling their shots to not intentionally shoot people, and then you get to Vietnam, and it's like 98% of the people are shooting their targets.
Yeah.
With the intent to kill.
Yeah, even like the Russians and the Germans, they did studies, and the Russians and Germans hated each other, but a lot of guys would like, it's like, just stop fighting, you know, they just keep cycling the rifle, but they're like, just stop shooting at me.
And they attribute that to, like, they changed the targets from like the big bullseye targets to having human targets and that.
Yeah.
So
I always feel weird about those at the gun when I go to the gun range and rent a lane. It's like, what targets do you? Because I just want the bullseye targets. It's like, you want the Saddam Hussein target? It's like, no, why? It's a picture of a guy.
You want the Eddie Murphy target? Like, why Eddie Murphy?
Wait, what?
Because he's black. What?
No, just give me the bullseye target. It doesn't need to be weird. They never have targets of like Hitler. Like, want to shoot at the Hitler target? I might shoot at that one. Want to shoot the Hitler target? Yeah, just to prove to everyone here I'm not a racist. I'm going to shoot at the Hitler target.
There is one joke I did like on one gun YouTube channel no longer follow, but I did like they have these weird targets, and there's one where it's a guy who kind of looks like who's the porn star? Jeremy
Why did I think Jeremy Piven? That's not it.
No.
Ron Jeremy.
Yes, Ron Jeremy. Okay, so it kind of looks like Ron Jeremy, and the guy's like kind of holding like a gun to a kid's head who kind of looks like Macaulay Culkin, and the guy's like, it's like, I'm gonna save you, Ron Jeremy, and he shoots the kid in the head because like he inverts it that it's Macaulay Culkin's the bad guy, and really it's Ron Jeremy who's in trouble.
Yeah, I never got the people that did the human. I mean, I've seen the human silhouette targets, like those are fine. But the ones where it's actually like people,
just a full-on picture of real people,
like Bin Laden or something, it's like, well, that's not really my job. And then when I did like some of the classes, they had the dummies that you shot because they're three-dimensional. And I mean, I did it because it's like, well, I paid for this class, but that was kind of odd. It's because the dummies were like this self-healing membrane, and they didn't move or anything or scream, thank God. But they were like, they were doing like the close drill, the firing from the hip or whatever, and and these things would take shots in the face. I mean, you're supposed to aim for the torso because it's much easier to hit. But yeah, sometimes people would, because you have a tendency to rise with a handgun, and it'd just go right from the middle of his chest up his face, and then you'd watch the holes like they kind of suck in. It's like, this is strange.
You're watching T2.
Sort of, not that dramatic, but yeah, the holes, because you blow these big holes in it, and because I was a smart ass who did that with my 44 Magnum that time. That was my pistol defense class. Fucking 44 Magnum this big. And I couldn't do the 10 shot thing because I only had 6 shots. But he's like, well, if you hit him with even 2 of those, it's probably game over. But yeah, that was, and then we did the shotgun class with the torso dressed in clothes, which that was the weird Australian guy was like, you got to see this, because it blows the clothes. Shotguns blow clothes to like they look like they've been thrown through a paper shredder, and it's like, got to be ready for that. It's like, I'm not really like ready for any of this. I'm just kind of interested in how it works, but got to see that. Okay, time to dress the dummy. It's like, you're really into this, dude. Like in a serious way. I think that guy eventually had a nervous breakdown, I heard. But.
I saw old videos. He was doing the Mosin handgun, the revolver that like it pushes forward and creates a seal so the gas doesn't go out the side.
Okay.
And so he had one where he had just like a normal revolver, and like he just put up like a piece of like tissue paper next to the revolver and fired it with the Mosin, and like nothing happened to it. And they fired the other one, and it just like the paper just flew into pieces.
Yeah,
and it's just to the side of it, like it didn't hit it. That was just the gas escaping between the gap between the cylinder and the barrel.
Well, I was watching a video once. They were talking about why Korth revolvers cost $5,000. And they had a slow-mo, and they were firing the nicest 357 like Thunder Ranch you could get, and it showed the gas expanding around the cylinder where the gap is, and they fired the Korth, and it still had it, but it had like almost a negligible amount because that's how tightly machined it was.
Yeah,
and it's like, but is it more accurate? Slightly.
Or I like that now that. Ian's taking his gifted Lugo Alien, or however you say it, and putting it through mud tests and stuff like that. It's like, thanks, Ian. Because that's a new, like, crazy new rifle or pistol that's out there, but it's like a $5,000 pistol.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, like, this is a really cool new idea. Like, I wonder if it holds up to, like, these torture tests and stuff.
Let's throw it in liquid nitrogen.
But yeah, he did the mud test with it, and it's like, if you could get it to rack back, it worked, but that was the hardest thing to get to rack back, especially because like the it's almost like the slide is in the middle of the gun, it's not on top, and so like getting kind of purchase on it when it's full of mud is a hard thing to do.
Yeah, it's like more the physical limitation of the operator than the gun. It's...
But also like there's a lot of like gap in there, so just mud just gets in there. But like once he fired it, it was like it seemed to operate just fine. Yeah, it uses also a similar gas block to the way those those P79s or whatever those pistols were, the Heckler and Koch pistols that like had the
the impinged gas delay thing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's expensive. I'm surprised they're revisiting that.
Well, I mean, it's $5,000 pistol, so
yeah.
Of course,
where Koch got away from that was the cost, but.
Well, and also like the thing about the way they designed it with this, it doesn't have that weird thing where the like where the gas block is in the pistol, it doesn't heat up like that one would. So like you'd have to wear gloves if you're like shooting more than like one magazine. So like their design gets around that. It's a Czech company that does it, but it's a really neat pistol design wise and stuff like that, but it's $5,000, so it's like might as well not even exist.
Yeah, it's good for you.
until what's that, who are the ones that make all the weird mostly plastic ones from out of Florida?
Caltech or
yeah until Caltech makes like their cheap version of it.
Yeah, I like those. That was like I was watching a Gun Channel recap this week, and they're talking like best guns of the year, and it's like that 5 and 7 weird pistol that like you load it on the top and it holds like 50 shots. It's like that's the gun of the year, and I was like, that looks. Number one, it looks cheap. I just don't like the looks of it. Number two, it's like it's not. You're holding this heavy thing out there, and it's big. It's a big gun. It looks like something from a science fiction movie.
Yeah, it looks like a RoboCop gun or something.
Yeah, but it's just firing. It's like this holds 50 rounds. Like, yeah, what does that weigh? Even with those really tiny bullets, it's like that's got to weigh 5-6 pounds. Like that can't be.
Well, yeah, it uses the same magazine that the FN90 does.
Yeah.
But it sandwiches around it the magazine, and it's not bigger than the magazine, so it's technically a pistol or whatever. But also it doesn't have a stock on it, so then you can sell it as a pistol and not as a short-barreled rifle. Yeah.
And I like to see your quick mag change on that. Okay, open the top, put the new one in.
Well, if you got 50, if you can't get right 50 shots, you're not going to get right on the second mag.
I fired a 5 and 7 once, and it was the original Fabrique Nationale from the mid 2000s.
Yeah,
where it looked like some kind of like industrial tool instead of a gun. It was a very weird looking gun, and it's like it was fine until you realize what the ammo costs. It's like, oh no, I'm not paying that much for ammunition. Like the ammo for that was twice as expensive as everything else back then. I can't imagine what it is now.
Yeah, and there's some crazy thing with it because it's not just, because the way they design the bullets, it's like you don't have to like kink the magazine to account. And it's something weird where like the metal has like kind of like some kind of like self-impregnating oil on it, so that you can stack them exactly in the same spot, so you don't have to kink the magazine like you do with other bullets. It's just something weird like that. It's like, oh yeah, no wonder these are expensive.
Yeah, you're getting into stuff that's just not widely available. But I mean, you can torture a Glock all day long. Regular old 9mm 45 caliber Glock, like those withstand the most punishment of any handgun I've ever seen. They literally do crazy stuff like, let's freeze them in ice blocks. Let's shoot 7,000 rounds through. They just got stacks of magazines there. And they actually get bored and the guys trade off because it takes a long time even with that. And the gun still works fine. I mean, the barrels change color by then, but it's still fine. And you can buy one of those for $400 all week long. So. But I don't like the trigger on them, so I've never been a Glock fan. It's not the lack of safety; it's just the big fat double stack magazine. I can't can't work that. Why can I hit bullseye with my 45 almost every time I shoot it when I've really been practicing, but never hit shit with a Glock? It's because the magazine's that's too thick. You can't use reset the trigger right.
That and like the striker fire of the striker fire pistols just have kind of mushy triggers, so you're less accurate with them. Because that's why people make those what do they call them, race guns.
Yeah,
where they're like 1911s, but they're 9mm, double stack 9mm, because it's basically you're just building like a 9mm 1911, but you really all you're trying to do is get the 1911 trigger on there because the trigger is better for target shooting stuff.
Yeah.
The striker files just kind of end up being less accurate. I also like the weird AR-15 that Ian was working with. It's like a thumb trigger.
Oh yeah.
That was weird.
Yeah, that was strange. It was like, well, it works, but this is, if you're used to any kind of, if you've been trained in any way to fire a gun, this completely like throws all that out the window. So you're pressing down with your thumb.
And he compared him shooting normally, and with that one, it was kind of like they were just about the same. So he was like, "Yeah, I can't really conclude this." I mean, this is only a test of one, so it doesn't necessarily mean. But like he couldn't himself recommend it over anything unless you just want something interesting, or it's like always, it's just like the weird. The way you sneak in gun stuff is it's like, oh, this is this is about accessibility for people who are handicapped in some way.
It's like crossbows, why they evolved from like obscure medieval weapons to deadly bows of whispering death at night. It's like, no, this is for people in wheelchairs, but guys, they got these crossbows that you're built on AR-15 lowers, and and you use like a winch to bring them back because they got like a 500-pound draw, which you could shoot clean through a car, the doors. I mean, front and back through the doors, and it's like, or you can shoot through glass and it makes a circular hole because it's flying so fast and hard it just carves its way through glass. It's like, these are for handicapped people. It's like, no, that's so you can be Robin Hood. You need that to fight Nancy Pelosi.
It's like how like it used to be like, oh, there's no way a civilian could have a silencer, but now like there's a lot of states where you can have a silencer. You just got to jump through hoops, but it's because they call them like the Hearing Protection Act. It's like, well, so you defend yourself in your home, you don't lose your hearing.
Yeah, that's why I need the silencer that the guy had on that gun in No Country for Old Men. Because they say the shotgun is the best defense. They just want to relive that hotel scene, in my house. Yeah, that's to get a silencer here is a $200 tax stamp.
Yeah,
and the sheriff of the county has to sign off on it, which our sheriff has already said, yeah, just bring in the paperwork. I'm not fucking with it. I'll sign it, whatever, as long as I know you got it and you know that I know you got it.
And there's new ATF forms that came out recently. I can't remember because. But I think they're easier to process somehow. I haven't done it yet, so not that I'm looking at a silencer. I need to get it for a different reason. But
yeah, I've never done exotics like stuff where it's like I got to alert local law enforcement that I have it. I mean, the guns I have are like destructive and powerful enough. I don't need
No, the stuff you need to go with the ATF for is either like when you modify. I guess it's technically, but you can get silencers in a lot of states. Well, I guess maybe like 10 or 15, which seems like a lot, I guess. I don't know.
No, you can get them in all but East Coast and California.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other ones is short-barreled rifles and short-barreled shotguns.
Yeah.
So,
which I have, I got around that by buying one of the Remington.
Yeah. If it doesn't have a
like device. Or something.
Yeah, a destructive device.
Not a shotgun, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of the weird things where it's like, if it doesn't have a stock on it, then it's considered a pistol. And it's like, yeah, we're cool with that.
Yeah, we're fine. Like, I've had it on the show before. It shouldn't be fine, but I'm fine with having it. But if they said tomorrow, it's like, oh, you can't sell these anymore. Everyone who has them is just grandfathered. You can have them, but you can't sell them. I'd be like, yeah, I can kind of see why. But people don't. The stuff, the crime they're worried about people committing is always high capacity handguns. That's where 90% of your crime comes from. It's not AR-15s or sawn-off shotguns or anything. Most people aren't getting a Tavor and going into the local gymnasium. Because if they did, they'd ban them immediately because they'd kill 100 people in like no time. There's some weird shotguns out there that I've seen. Everyone's getting on the weird shotgun bandwagon, where they're like double tube on the top, single. Everyone's got a version of it, and it looks like something straight out of a science fiction movie.
Yeah.
Like Smith and Wesson just came out with one like a year ago, and you just load 2 tubes on the top, and then when you pump the gun, it only loads from one tube. Then you can flip it, but you can decide which tube it's coming out of, because if one tube has buckshot and the other has a slug, you can switch back and forth on the back. But I imagine this thing's got to weigh 8 or 9 pounds by the time it's fully loaded.
Yeah, I mean, it's purely just like a range toy by then. It's just
it's like no practical application.
I like the one. I think the name of the company is Standard Manufacturing, which is just a great generic title.
Yeah, it's what holding company has that so they don't get sued.
And like they have this double barrel shotgun that looks like something out of Doom, and like it's like 2 tubes, and they load up behind the grip.
Yeah,
and it's a pump action shotgun, but it fires both barrels every time.
Fun. One hand that for me.
Or maybe you can. No, I think it's both barrels at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, if it's double barreled, they did that for a reason. So
I was going to say, because there are some weird guns where it's like left and right.
Yeah,
but I think this one's just both at the same time, or maybe it can do both. I don't know. It's extremely expensive and completely useless. So
yeah.
But it's cool. It's cool to look at. But
I mean, the one I do like that seems usable, just got to clip your fingernails very close, is the Tavor, the bolt-up shotgun, which holds like 15 rounds if you put the small ones, or not the shorty ones, but the standard length ones in. But then I've heard so many horror stories about feed problems with that. It's like, well, okay, because it's got a very complicated mechanism. Because if you roll it to an empty chamber, it unloads. It's just like it just makes sure the chamber is always empty. And when the chamber is empty, when you rock the cylinder around, it automatically loads a new one in. There's some system in there that works, but then again, you can't find them anywhere. They're expensive, and then I've heard nothing but horror stories about feed problems with them. Yeah. So it's like, I'm not interested.
Yeah, the thing about shotguns, I always thought shotguns would be like really expensive, but they're like really not. And I guess because you don't really have to rifle the barrel, that kind of like cuts down the production cost. And like I think like in terms of like military use and police use, like they're very limited in their use. But because there's so many like these crazy shotgun shells, I think it just keeps it in the public eye. It's like, oh, I think I could see a purpose for that.
Yeah, a shotgun is it's a blunderbuss is all it is. Doesn't require a lot of training. It's not going to kill someone 2 miles away. They're very effective in in anything where someone's close to you and they could surprise you. It's like, the shotgun's the best choice because it's available, it works, it's devastatingly damaging at 20 feet.
You don't got to be that accurate with it.
Yeah, you have somewhat accurate.
Yeah, you just got to shoot cones of violence out. So.
Yeah, people usually, whatever people are doing, 90% of them are going to stop when they see that. It's like, how bad do you need your heroin? It's like, if I saw you in half with this, you're like, there's going to be no more heroin in your life, or whatever normal situations you're going to encounter where people are trying to break into your house, which doesn't happen to almost anyone you can think of, or if it does, it's very clustered in certain areas. Because there have been like people break into people's houses where I live, but it's never people that are home.
Yeah,
there's never been a situation in the area I live in, like a mile circle around my house, where somebody successfully came into someone's home and stole things while they were home. Now, there's been people that have tried, and there's people that went and got guns, and the people ran away. It's like, okay, well, see, that's a win-win for everyone, because no one's dead, and you didn't get your house broken into, and the word will get around to the Thieves Guild or whatever. It's like, don't go in that guy's house.
Yeah, I mean, the people that are going to steal while you're there are people that are like desperate and they're not like professional thieves.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, I don't know, that there's that To Catch a Thief show where they really get into it's like, oh yeah, it's like thieves are going to steal while you're at work.
Yeah, because thieves don't want to be shot or arrested.
Yeah. And they're going to like case the joint and make sure you're there or not or whatever.
And in states like Michigan and Texas and places like that, they've changed the laws to, it's like once someone comes into your home, you can literally like take a chainsaw to them and there's like no ramifications if they're not supposed to be there. But outside the house, it's very different. But I know in Michigan, like if someone comes into your house and they're not supposed to be there, now it can't be like your girlfriend you're fighting with and it's like, oh, I decided I didn't want her to be here, so I shot her. It has to be someone committing a crime or trying to break in. But yeah, they've basically put everyone on notice. It's like, do what you have to. There's no judgment here. Only if bullets go outside the house and kill your neighbors, then there's a problem with that. But, yeah, because we have that castle doctrine here, but unlike Texas, it doesn't extend outside the home. You still have what they call duty to retreat here. Like you can't go out and seek like I'm gonna set things right. It's like no.
The land is mine. I am the justice that delivered upon by God.
All of a sudden you become Judge Dredd. Like, no. You don't need that shit.
So I have a F1 regression again, I guess, because it's not an update. I've been watching old F1s because I just, when I go to bed, I just throw an old race on. So I went to the 2009 season. That was pretty interesting because it was the Braun GP one. It was kind of this out of nowhere team. They just kind of like had the right upgrades for the season. And they really only dominated like the first part of the season. But now I just finished 2010, which that's where Sebastian Vettel won his first championship. And that's a real interesting season because he ends up winning 4 championships in a row, but like you wouldn't think through that season that he was going to win the championship. And I think it's like that year has the most changes on like who was the champion at the time. It had like 10 changes.
Wow. That's an active season.
Yeah. Well, there's like this weird turnarounds because you have like it's basically Red Bull's dominating the season, at least in terms of qualifying, because it's like the both Red Bulls, Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel, are kind of like 1-2 in almost every race. Mm-hmm. But they did not necessarily guarantee to win. And then like maybe like 3 races in, then you have McLaren makes a comeback, and like Lewis Hamilton wins like 3 races in a row, and then he's like leading the championship. This is also the F Duct season, so that's fun.
Oh, okay, the old F Ducks.
And then like around the half point, like the McLaren's kind of like, oh, they just kind of like fade back. I mean, they're still up there, but Red Bull's still out front. But then like Ferrari makes this like ferocious comeback. Well, really, it's just Fernando Alonso when he's with Ferrari, and then like he leads the championship, like for like basically like the next half of the season because he wins like 3 races in a row, and then they go into the final race and he's basically got it won, and then Sebastian Vettel wins the race, and then like the whole race. Like he just like Fernando Alonso kind of just screwed up the qualifying. He kind of started in the back, and then there's a guy. And Renault like really turns it around in the season, so they're really good at the end of the season. And he's just stuck behind this Renault the entire time this race, and it basically costs him the race to the much. He's like at the end of the race, he like pulls up behind the Renault guy, he's like flipping him off, and I'm like, "What? I raced you. You lost."
Was I supposed to take a dive?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I found out like 23 to 25 is like the sweet spot for when you win your first championship.
Yeah,
because I think
when the wiring's still nice and tight.
Yeah, well, I mean it's like Michael Schumacher. He won his first when he's 25. He goes on to win 6 more. He won his first 2 like with Benetton.
Okay.
I think with a Ford engine.
Okay.
And then there's like a couple of years in between he doesn't win, and then he wins like 5 in a row with Ferrari. And then you got Fernando Alonso. He wins his first one when he's 24. Sebastian Vettel when he's 23. Lewis Hamilton when he's 24. And then recently Max Verstappen when he's 24. So it's a magical time to win your first championship. But yeah, it was like I don't really remember people like talking about it like that much. It's like, oh, this is a pretty contentious season. Like it wasn't just like given that Sebastian Vettel was going to win it. Yeah. And it's also interesting to get like see how good Mark Webber was. Yeah, because I feel like he was just this guy who like kind of like he was always going to come in second place to Sebastian Vettel, and so he's just kind of forgotten to history because he's just one of those guys that comes in second place the entire time. Which is a lot of guys of that F1. Because like I also look at some Fernando Alonso stuff. It's like he almost won he came in second place in the championship like 5 years. He won 2 in a row, and then there's like 5 other years he was like 2 of them where he was 1 point away from winning the championship.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's like, oh, he's crazy good. And it's like why did they kick him out of Ferrari? But I can't remember. Ferrari kind of just demands success, even if you're second place, they don't care. So
yeah,
they just have that history. Yeah, and Sebastian, yeah, he was the youngest. I believe he still is the youngest driver to win a championship at 23. I think he might have been 22 in the beginning because they end at the end of the year. And so yeah, now I'm watching 2011, and it's like Red Bull are always 1-2 at the front, but like there's always something that goes wrong with their car. I mean, not always, but sometimes there's just like their engine blows up or whatever, and they're out of the race, or a wreck happens. Lewis Hamilton is just they're just so behind the Red Bulls. He's just throwing up on the inside of trying to get on people, and sometimes it works and sometimes it crashes. So
yeah.
And then also I came across the crazy Canadian race in 2011 where it's like a 4-hour broadcast because the race was red flagged twice.
Oh, okay.
For rain, and then eventually they get it going, and there's like 3 safety cars, and then once they get it going again, and yeah, it ends up Jenson Button wins it for McLaren. He pitted 6 times in the race.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's like, on one of the restarts, he's like in like 13th place, but like I don't. They always say something with the British drivers; they're just good at driving in the rain. Yeah. And he was like going like a minute faster than other people or something crazy like that.
Wow. Yeah.
He was just tearing through the field, and there's only like one dry line, and like you can see him when he like goes around somebody, like he's taking a huge chance going by somebody because he's just going off into the wet part of the track to go by them. And like there's a part like near the end where he's catching up on Sebastian Vettel, and Sebastian Vettel just kind of like he gets like the back tire up on the curb, and it's just a little wet, and he just spins around. And he just goes by him and wins the race. It's a crazy race, and that track's really cool because it's like this man-made island in the middle of a river in Canada. So it looks like a ship that's sinking. That's what the track looks like.
That's gotta feel good. If I miss this curve, I just go into the lake.
Yeah, they got walls up and everything.
Oh, I know, but yeah, psychologically, it's still easier.
And there's a fun part of the track where it's called the Wall of Champions because it's this kink in the track that kind of goes right, and it's like you can basically take it at full throttle, but not all the time. It really depends on your tires.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people go like hit the wall, so that's why they call it the Wall of Champions, because so many people hit the wall. And it's crazy because like on one of the longest straights on the track, the straight goes into the pits. So there's like this fork. It's like here's the track, here's the pits, and there's like weird things where people like will crisscross and nearly hit each other. It's like, oh, I'm going to the pits, and like that's fucking crazy. But yeah, that's just me watching some old F1. So it was a bit more competitive back then, but that was still back before they had 2014 is when they have the new regulations with the hybrid era, and that's when kind of Mercedes just runs away with it. But
Yeah.
yeah, this era I'm watching is pretty tumultuous. Because like we start in like 2007 when it's like Lewis Hamilton's rookie year and he like loses the championship by 1 point, which so does his teammate Fernando Alonso. Like that's how close that season was.
Yeah.
And then like so Kimi Räikkönen wins it, then Lewis Hamilton wins it the next year, then you have Jenson Button with Braun Gimi wins the year after that, and then you start the Red Bull domination era, but they didn't really dominate like those first 2 years. Like it was pretty back and forth. I hear like the 2013 season is when really Sebastian Vettel just completely annihilates the entire field.
Oh, okay.
Like it's like one of the largest wins margins of all time. Like it's like the closest person's like 150 points away from it.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it was because like this season I'm watching now, the 2011. It's the they were having the Bridgestone tires before, and now they switched over to Pirelli for the 2011 season.
Oh.
And I hear by like the 2013 season, just like Sebastian Vettel figures out the tires somehow better than everybody else.
Yeah, because now there's just one tire manufacturer, right?
Yeah, I mean there always is, but like it's been Pirelli since 2011.
Yeah.
Which it looks like the longest stretch, except for it looks like Goodyear had it between 1985 and 1997.
Oh, okay.
But
Oh
yeah, and also this year because the Pirelli tires are new. Like they kind of designed them to kind of fall apart, and so there's like 2 to 3 to 4 pit stops in some races.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's faster just to pit and get new tires and just run them through and then get new tires. It's pretty crazy. And there's like the amount of like debris on the they call them pebbles or whatever, of like the rubber that flies off the tires, and like you can clearly see it like at this time, because I think sometimes it's hard to see, but here it's like there's so much rubber on that fucking track you can see the driving line, because it's like, yeah, don't drive anywhere else but here. It's just full of dead rubber.
Little rubber balls.
Yeah.
Now, is that in a liquid form when it flies off the tires, or is it just little balls of rolled up rubber?
I mean, those tires get pretty hot, so I'm not sure. I mean, it's probably very spongy, but I doubt it's necessarily
like
liquid.
Balls like paint. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be like, basically, it's like what's happening to the track is like it's like the track is a sander and the tire is a piece of wood, and it's the way it's sanding. It's just kind of like the middle part kind of moves out, and once it gets to the end, it just kind of flies off, where it's no longer touching the ground anymore.
Oh, okay.
And there's just different stuff with tire pressure, where it's like, you have to heat up the tires to get the pressure right, because like the tire pressure it starts with is not the tire pressure it'll be when you're optimizing it. It's like, all this like crazy stuff that you don't give drivers credit for actually managing. Because
yeah,
well, you just hit the gas and go. I don't get it. Why are you bad at this?
Yeah, like a lot of people think it's like, yeah, the key to victory is the accelerator. It's like, oh no. Said if you push the gas all the way to the ground on those cars, and almost any gear they're in, they'll just spin in a circle. You just liquefy the back tires. They have way more power than they do rubber or brakes.
I like the one story some guy told. I don't know if it's true, but it's just one of those things that sounds almost true, where it's like, I think it was one of the Red Bull, an engineer, they basically gave him like a Christmas present where he got to drive one of the old cars. And so like he was like heading up to a corner, and he tapped on the brakes, and basically he said like his head lit in his lap. Yeah. And then when he pulled back into the pits, they're like, congratulations, you used 30% of the braking power of the car.
Well, you've seen that famous I forget where it was, Daytona or Talladega. It's one of the night races for NASCAR.
Yeah.
In the 90s they did, and they like turned the lights down except for on the track, and you could see like the exhaust manifolds. They're just bright cherry red under the hoods of those. Even the the NASCAR cars. It's like that's how much abuse those engines are. They're just it's almost to the melting point of that metal.
Oh yeah, and I forgot the other crazy accoutrements that go around it. So also at this time, they get 8 engines a year they can go through.
Yeah.
But every year they keep losing the amount of engines they can use because now it's 3.
Yeah.
And also the grid girls. It's the funniest thing. They don't do it anymore. But like when the top 3 guys, they kind of go off in this isolated room where they get weighed. Because instead of weighing the car, they just weigh the driver because it's just quicker. And they kind of have like a bottle of water with like some saline or kind of Gatorade stuff in their electrolytes so they can replenish. And then like as they're like kind of walking to the podium ceremony, it's just a ton of like pretty ladies in kind of skimpy clothing clapping their hands. it's so weird.
Grid girls, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's even ones like that, like the ones you wouldn't expect, where it's like Bahrain and Saudi Arabia have grid girls, and they're wearing like skimpy clothes. It's like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Or they have the one where it's like the weird side cut out in the outfit, so it's like it goes like it's like it's like asymmetrical. So there's like this big cutout, so you can kind of see like their hip, and it's like either they're not wearing underwear or they're very strategically wearing underwear. I don't know.
In Europe, it's probably not wearing.
So yeah, that was a fun thing they don't do anymore. So
yeah.
I don't know if it's just cost or just like, this looks sexist, so we won't do it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those races have moved to a more like family-friendly format.
Yeah.
Because that's where the money is, and yeah, they don't do stuff like that.
I know there's a funny one. There was like a lady. She was a motorcycle racer, and like in the race they'd have like sort of like grid girls too, but like before the race start, they'll have like somebody basically holding an umbrella over the motorcycle to like kind of keep them cool. And they would just have like, ladies skimpily clad out there. And there's this one lady, like she just had this dude who's basically like in like booty shorts out there with the umbrella. It's like, yeah, we're moving this both ways.
Yeah, finding some Austrian bodybuilder, just hold the thing up for me. Oh, let's see. We watched some TV shows over my Christmas break. Watched because I bought an iPhone, I get Apple TV free for 3 months. So I've been catching up on some of that stuff that I would like. And I watched Foundation. I know we talked about it before, and I wasn't like wildly impressed with it, like the first 3 episodes. And
yeah,
but yeah, it kind of, once I accepted the fact that it's like, they're sort of telling their own story. It kind of won me back. It's like, yeah, this stuff with the Emperor and all that. It's like, oh yeah, that guy does a great job of portraying this, psychotic dynasty that's still allowed to exist. And there's some turnarounds with his character, like when he goes and like he feels politically threatened by one of the major religions. And he goes on that pilgrimage to the Spire or whatever, where people die along the way because you're basically walking across the desert with no clothes on. And he, as he reaches the end of this, he, you're supposed to have some kind of vision in the pond at the end of the spiral, and he kind of convinces him that he does, and it makes you believe it's like, oh, maybe this guy isn't a monster after all. But then he has the robot lady deliver poison to the woman who was supposed to take over the head of that religion, and then you realize they show a flashback. It's like, yeah, he never saw anything. He's just because he is just dead as a he's just a copy of a copy of a copy.
Well, and the story he told was basically like robot lady's pilgrimage story, because she had some flower encased in there, and he basically said he saw this flower.
Yeah,
and then the robot lady figures it out. It's like, oh, you were lying, weren't you? It'd be sad if you were lying.
Yep. So
yeah, and that stuff's, and that whole the whole Empire guy is or you said it's original to this series. It wasn't in the books, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, they find different ways to have characters basically live forever or exist spottingly through time, like either through going through hibernation or stuff like that, or you have
Or they're just clones of each other.
Yeah, clones, or it's a computer synthesis of their brain, or it's a robot, because it's just one robot because they had robot wars and they decided no AIs.
Yep, she's the last robot. She's been around for like 15,000 years. So,
yeah, and there's the stuff where they have the, you find out like the air, the whole air is being poisoned, and there's like the one guy he's like colorblind and he has to like hide it from the other brothers.
Yeah, and he's left-handed and they're right-handed, and yeah, because you find out the resistance movement, which was behind the whole Starbridge bombing. That's who did that, not the Anacreons and the, what's the other group called? The Thesbans or whatever.
Yeah, Theros or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, they didn't do that. I mean, they're awful people too, but just in their own way. But they didn't attack the Empire, and because there's this resistance movement against the Empire that's just as bad as the Empire. It's just as evil. They just want power for their own ends. Yeah, because the robot lady kills the young brother Dawn. She breaks his neck because he has been corrupted by this underground group. They've genetically corrupted him. Then you find out at the end of the episode, it's like, oh yeah, you've all been genetically corrupted by this group.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, now what? And then they go on the mission. Like Salvor Hardin who went from being in the books a political leader who understood politics to being an action star in the series. But they do go find like the most powerful warship ever built.
Is that in the books, or is that something?
No,
just for this?
Okay. There is like a dark fleet or something, but they figure out it's like, oh, we're just better off destroying this because we're not going to be able to maintain its power. So they find there's stuff like that, like the one guy, like Hardin's boyfriend, is like, yeah, that's a real character. In the books, but he's one of what they call the traitors, which they work like secretly with the Foundation to spread knowledge, but a limited amount, and so that's why he has that trade ship and stuff. And
yeah,
but that's a little different. Again, they've compressed this probably into something maybe a little more interesting to modern audiences than just long treatises on politics and history, which is the books were kind of that. They weren't as interesting as Dune, but they were just as intricate. And it also, and again, like in the books, like the Harry Seldon's psychohistory and stuff, like he's not a living character after the first book. And in the other two books, like it's like, oh, it all falls apart, and the Foundation figures out, well, we're just on our own and we're going to have to do our best because history took so many turns that they couldn't predict, that it's like, oh, okay, this thing's happened that they didn't understand, like mind reading and mind control and psychokinesis and stuff like that all came into it later, and there was no history of that before, so they couldn't account for that. So
is the thing here, this is what happens in books where like you're going to build this arc for the future of humanity, and then like the geek pops out of the thing. It's like, no, you're rebuilding humanity. You're not building an arc. Is that what happens in the books?
No, in the books, it's more like the hologram of Harry Seldon shows up and describes exactly what happened and exactly what you've done. Those are called the Seldon crises.
Okay.
The Foundation, like every 100 or 500 years, there's a predicted Seldon crisis. And the people that originally ran the Foundation became very dependent on, it's like, well, Harry Seldon's going to pop out of the vault as a hologram and tell us what happened and what we need to do. And that's where guys like Salvor Hardin were like, no, we can't depend on this anymore. Because if everyone's dead and no one's here to receive his message, who cares? And that's when things started diverging from it. Basically, the scientists and historians lose power, and it becomes a very political thing. But they're still like on message for what the Foundation is. Like they don't wrest power away from it. It's like we just got to achieve our goals through different means and relying on ourselves and our own ingenuity. Because if we're just waiting for the magic wizard to come out of the tower, it's like we're never going to get anything done.
Well, and I don't know if this is in the book. You'll have to tell me where it's like it's kind of an evolution of people, where basically people are able to like essentially see through time now, but it's only an evolutionary thing because that's the people that weren't affected by the wave, or like Hardin wasn't purely affected by the wave thing that was making everybody go unconscious on the planet.
That's kind of the burgeoning telekinesis from the book.
Okay.
This is seen as much more practical because in the books you end up with a character called the Mule, which is like the ultimate psychic, and he can just control people's minds.
Oh, okay.
And that's what throws Selden's plans off because there was no accounting for that. And he tries to become the center of power in the universe, but I think they figure out how to kill him. But because they said like, oh, this is just a new emperor, this immortal guy that can just control everyone's minds. It's like humanity will not last that. And so I think that's what I don't know where they're going. They're moving things around very quickly.
Yeah, I mean they set up a season 2 potentially, so
yeah,
they'll probably make it. I don't know. It seems like Apple's throwing a lot of money at their TV show. So
yeah, they seem to. There's a ton because I've watched the Foundation. I've watched Invasion. There's some other. They seem to like that like slow, dreadful science fiction. That seems to be their thing, where they like the kind of. It's not Star Wars. It's more like, and a lot of their shows seem like they just kind of
a 70s science fiction throwback.
Sort of, just with some elements in it.
Yeah. That's it.
I'll be right back.
All right.
Talk amongst yourself.
Yeah, I'd say the thing about Foundation has a weird quality gap in terms of visual production, because like the first 3 episodes I'd say have like cinema quality special effects, and then the middle and last 3 ones have very sparse special effects, or they're kind of bad, especially the ones on Terminus, because it seems like something out of Xena Warrior Princess. It just, it's clearly a CGI ship, and it just doesn't look that great. At least not on the stuff in space looks fine. It's just the stuff on the surface when compared with like people standing there and then a CGI image on there, it just doesn't look that great.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like how the special effects on Terminus don't look that great, like in the later half of the season, where like the first half of the season has like cinema quality special effects. Yeah,
it seems like they moved the budget around a little bit.
Yeah.
They saved up some budgets for the later ship.
Well, I remember that part where like they had the ships come down, like where like the guys control them with like these weird like controller things on their arms, and the ship just looks like something out of like Xena Warrior Princess. Like it's that level of special effects where it's like, this is clearly a CGI ship. They're not even trying to like make it look. But I think it's just something where it's like but those spaceships when they're in space, when everything's CGI, it looks fine. But like when you have to put it with what they shot on actual film or digital, it doesn't look that great.
Yeah. So. Yeah, but it's fine so far. We'll see what happens in the next season.
Yeah.
And we speaking of seasons, we watched the first episode of the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
Which seems to be kind of it's like they're taking their time with it. They're telling his story from when you remember him from Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. You get him crawling out of the Sarlacc pit. Which it's funny because someone compared it like a clip from Parks and Recreation. I don't think it was actually in there, but it was this famous clip of where Patton Oswalt is like doing a filibuster and talking about like Star Wars and stuff.
Yeah.
And basically like the opening, he basically describes the opening of the Book of Boba Fett, where it's like, it's the 2 sons of Tatooine pan down to Boba Fett crawling out of the Sarlacc pit. It's exactly what happens.
Yep.
And I thought it was a weirdly paced episode because they're jumping back and forth, but like, at least they're like, it's like they're kind of you have this backstory going on interspersed with what's going on currently, and it seems like they're being pretty patient with both, so it just kind of comes off as weird.
Yeah.
The fight scenes weren't necessarily that spectacular, but that's fine. They're fine. I mean, when they get brutal, I like when like like they're fighting at first, and then they kind of get the upper hand, and there's that guy on the wall, and he just fires a rocket into him, and he's just completely evaporated. It's like, that's fun and brutal.
That's the Boba Fett we know. Well, then he swings the electro staff, and he hits the guy in the head when he has that crazy look on his face. That guy's not getting up. Like, yeah, that's.
But they keep but then they have to come back to this thing where they keep throwing him in a back to tank. So I don't know if he has like some terminal disease in him, or if he's just constantly beat up.
I think he's just. Well, I think the stay in the Sarlacc pit probably screwed him up, and
yeah.
And then I also think like, he's just constantly engaged in like brutal fighting with people. And, and we don't know what happened like interstitially between him and the Mandalorian, like, because he has some kind of relationship with the Sand People.
Yeah.
We don't know what that whole backstory was, because he didn't recover his armor until like the Mandalorian.
Yeah.
So there was apparently a long story of him in the desert. Boba Fett is a clone, so we don't know like how long they live or what kind of problems they have.
Well, you do if you watched all the cartoon series, but
yeah.
Because there's
I'm assuming he was a special clone because his dad wanted him as a son.
Yeah, so like all the clones are like kind of like they age rapidly so they can get them up and like running faster.
Yeah.
So I think it's like an 8-year cycle or something like that, from like when they basically birth them and then they grow into like 18-year-olds, but like in 8 years. And so you can send them out on the front lines to fight.
Yeah.
And then I believe there is something later on where it's like, there's a problem. And so like, they don't stop aging that fast. And so I believe in Star Wars Rebels, which is further in the future, that's when like, the Empire takes over. It's like, well, why are there no more stormtrooper guys around, or the clone guys around anymore? It's like, well, cause they're basically like 60 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, the Caminos have a profit margin to maintain. They can't just grow you an army and not resupply you in 30 years.
So there could be stuff there, but I believe he didn't get like that fast aging thing. So
yeah, because he was a kid in the Clone Wars.
Attack of the Clones, yeah.
Yeah, Attack of the Clones.
That's when he first shows up. Yeah, and they cut back to that where he's holding his dad's head.
Yeah, I think I come back to like they've changed the name of his ship for the show, because it's not called the Slave One anymore.
Oh, what's it called now?
Fire Spray.
Oh, okay.
And everyone was, and I kind of agreed with people like, well, that's just more of that PC bullshit. And it's like, yeah, it is, because in the end of the day, the Fets were not good people. Anything for money. I mean, they didn't have any political allegiances. They weren't necessarily like dark side people, but they were just like, yeah, whatever you need done, as long as it pays. It's like his dad said in Attack of the Clones, I'm just a simple man trying to make my way in the universe. And I'll just murder everyone in the way. So yeah, it's like, I get why you're doing that, but it's also kind of silly because, the thing that Mandalorian is a redemptive character, because like, yeah, he's this hard guy who does this tough stuff, but at the end of the day, like he's kind of following his own, internal chronometer based on how he was raised and what he knows of the world. Like the Fets are not Mandalorians; they're just bad people that do bad things for money.
Yeah.
They're not cruel for the sake of cruelty, but it's like, yeah, they don't care if people die.
Well, yeah, and yeah, you have him taking over
Jabba the Hutt's crime empire.
Yeah, but it's like he's gonna do it like, presumably he's gonna do it in a more honest way or whatever. But so he can't completely get away from crime and just be a good bounty hunter. But he's not gonna do crime the way that the Hutts did. So
yeah. No, and Jabba the Hutt was a drug dealer, and therefore, by extension, so was Han Solo, because the load he had to dump that got him in trouble with Jabba the Hutt was drugs. It was
spice, right?
Yeah, basically a euphoric drug. It's like, yeah, so they're all but I don't. Again, that wasn't portrayed as a universe where there was a lot of good choices.
And Tatooine's always like portrayed as this place that's kind of outside the influence of both the Empire and the Republic. So
Yeah, it's
like nobody wants to be in charge of it, so they just let it go to just let it fall into upheaval.
yeah. They kind of explained. I remember when I used to read all the Star Wars like expanded universe books, like why that was, because it was kind of like where a lot of things abutted together, and to control that area of space, like there wasn't a lot of commerce there other than crime, and there would be no reason, like there's practical economic reasons why they didn't build bases there and just try to control it. And also it was part of the Hutts are like the mafia of that universe.
Yeah.
And they bribe people because the Republic was corrupt, just as corrupt as the Empire, and you bribe the right officials and it's like, yeah, you can do anything you want on this planet. Illegal gambling, drugs, enslavement of people, that's all legal there. Or not illegal.
That's the funny thing about the A More Civilized Age podcast when they get into it, because a lot of the things they do is like, because like it, on the simple terms, like what a child is supposed to believe is the Empire is bad and the Republic is good, and they get into more nuanced thing where it's like, no, the Republic is terrible. It's like, and also the Jedi are supposed to be like, this good force, and like, they do all these things to make sure that they're not influenced by evil and all that stuff. It's like, you're kidnapping children and turning them into warriors.
Yeah.
You're offering the illusion of choice. Like, hey, your kid can be a Jedi or they can be shunned by their people for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, there's not a lot of good choices here.
And they make a clone army, which are basically slaves. Like,
Yeah,
you're born and bred to fight a war. It's like, what if I don't want to? It's like, we don't know what to do with you.
Yeah, we just throw you back in the vat, and, dissolve you and make another one that will. Those are your options.
And like, and there's just fun stuff where it's like, yeah, this is why the Republic falls, because they're just like, they're naive idealists that don't actually know how to get anything done.
Yeah. Sound familiar, anyone?
And the other side is just cool, evil people.
Yeah.
I want to be cool and evil.
I'm ready to be the leader. Always hear the guy that says that. I want to lead you. It's like, oh no. We don't want those guys. But yeah, it's a good start. I mean, it's just like, it's a pick-me-up waiting for the Mandalorian.
Yeah. Which, I don't... When does that come out?
2022.
Okay.
It's very nebulous.
Yeah, because I don't know because usually like the Disney Plus has like just whenever one show ends, there's just another show rating. It's either a Star Wars show or a Marvel show. So I don't know what's the next show in waiting.
Yeah, I'm not sure. They have a few Star Wars things queued up.
Yeah, because they have like season 3 Mandalorian. I know they're working on a Ahsoka show, and there's another Star Wars show they're working on. Was it like
Kenobi?
Oh yeah, Kenobi. Yeah, and there's also isn't there an Alderaan show that they're working on?
I don't know about that.
Okay.
I know Disney Plus is like probably the best value for entertainment of all the paid streaming services.
Yeah.
Because it's like $6 a month, and you literally get like the backlog of everything. So
yeah,
and they have good original shows.
Apple's fairly cheap, but like all they have is their stuff.
Yeah,
that's all you get. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I think Apple's like $4, $5 a month. It's
yeah.
like, oh, I pay more to Patreon for a podcast once a week. That's an hour long. So yeah, it's good value though, because I find myself watching a lot of nostalgic things. It's like, oh, I remember this movie when I was a kid. I mean, the first thing I watched on it was The Black Hole. I don't know why. It's like it's one of those weird movies like that, and like I said, my Black Hole movies, that and Event Horizon. It's like if it's on, I'll watch it. I don't know why. Neither one of them are great or even good, but goddamn, they're watchable.
Speaking of a harrowing journey, we read a book this month. Last month, we have Endurance: Shackleton's Incredible Voyage by Alfred Lansing.
Yes.
Which is about an expedition to Antarctica that goes wrong.
Very wrong.
Yeah, and I guess spoilers is, but like you read the back of it, it's like, oh, all these guys died, right? It's
Yeah.
like, no. What if I told you they all lived? And like, you're shitting me.
That's what was so amazing about this story was that nobody died. Oh, by the way, this book was written in like 1959.
Oh, okay, huh?
And it still holds up as like, yeah, this is a great. Like you would have thought it was written last year. Like,
Yeah.
oh, it's a very well written book.
Well, yeah, it's why it can, and the reason they're able to write it like this is that they just have all these diaries of these guys. That's why you get all these details of everything. It's like, well, how did they get these details? It's like, didn't everybody die? And it's like, no, they didn't. In fact, there's like a guy who shot a bunch of film, and they have photos of the of stuff in here. So
yeah, it's pretty weird when you realize it's like, oh, this is an actual. When you do research on it, it's like, oh, this is the actual ship. This is the Endurance.
well, and I thought like it was gonna be. I thought it was like a lot earlier than what I thought it was, because if you look at the front of the book, it's like a wooden ship, kind of getting stuck in ice flows or whatever. It's like, oh, is this like the 1890s or something?
Yeah.
Or yeah, 1800s, or early 1800s. But like, no, this like ship has like a screw on the back of it. It's a motorized boat. It just also happens to have sails and stuff too.
Yeah.
And it's also like one of the last like wood ships that were built like this. Because there's a cool section that explains the boat's called Endurance, and like it explains all the special effort that went into building the ship, and it gets stuck between these two ice flows and eventually it just sinks. But like the thing is, like they're talking about like, well, both these ice flows are like millions of tons, and the fact that the ship can like doesn't immediately explode into splinters is kind of like a testament to the construction that it was made with. So
Well, and they would go out there with pickaxes because they thought it would be better. Like if we can just axe the ice away and these flows keep coming together, it'll just push it up out of the water.
yeah.
It'll just kind of lay there for a while. It's like, that's a good shelter because we're obviously not getting through the Weddell Sea at this point. So we might as well do this. And
Yeah, so like so they're just going down to Antarctica, and like really the thing that gets them is it's like trying to predict ice flows and like where they intersect and stuff like that, and they just kind of end up getting it wrong, and they get stuck in an ice flow.
yeah.
And they just kind of hang out on the ice flow and you know, make camp and stuff like that, and until it gets like super cold when they have to like go back in the ship when it's like 40 below or something.
And then remember, this is the Southern Hemisphere too. So, because they talk about like August is approaching and it's going to be a hard time. It's like, well, things are going to get warm. And it's like, no, it's reverse. It's like, that's the hardest times down there is it's opposite of our seasons up here. And it took me a minute to grasp that. It's like, oh yeah, the spring and summer here are going to be awful down there because everything's reversed.
Well, there's also stuff where it's like, you know, there's like almost no daylight, and then there's times where it's like it's 24 hours of daylight. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not even near land. They're just like fucking with these ice flows in the first part of it.
And it's interesting to this day, some of the mapping and cartography they did, like they still use it because nobody goes there for anything. Like the Navy still uses stuff. Like when they made the Drake Passage, and they said, yeah, that's like one of the most violent places you can cross from. It's from what is it? From Antarctica to the tip of Argentina or something. It's like, yeah, because it's all that hot and warm water running together. And it's just like, yeah, it's just a constant tornado in the water. Good luck.
Oh yeah, they talk about cross waves too, where there's like, it's like the sea is going one way underneath because of the current, and then the wind is blowing in the opposite or a perpendicular direction, and it's creating like these cross waves. It's like really a wave of grids, or grid waves, like going across the sea. It's a lot of crazy, violent stuff happening down here that you just never see.
Yeah, it's
so they have to like abandon the ship. And well, the good thing it's like freezing out, because the thing is they can just kill animals and like they don't have to worry about a freezer or keeping. It's like, well, it's frozen, we're good. So they get a lot of meat. They kill a lot of seals and penguins and birds to keep everybody fed, because that's kind of like the main thing, is just keeping everybody fed.
Yeah, this was this mission was noted as being very well provisioned. It's one of the only reasons these people lived as long as it is. They had so many guns and so much ammo that they could just like kill 100 seals in a day, which like that's a lot of meat. That's like 2 months worth of meat or something. But then again, that's all you're eating.
Yeah.
It's boiled seal, fried seal, cooked seal.
And like, yeah, and they don't have wood or anything because there's no like natural resources they can. So, but the blubber they have like a blubber stove. They have to put the blubber in and it'll keep the and then they can melt ice with it to make water and stuff like that. But then they're looking at it like, oh, we don't have a blubber to get the stove working on. So then guys have to like pack canteens full of snow and like keep it close to their bodies so their body heat will melt the snow and they get basically like a tablespoon of water at the end of it.
Yeah, it's dreadful.
Yeah. And then like one of probably the saddest part is that they're exploring the ice flow they're on because they're getting away from the boat, and then they're basically kind of like riding this ice flow like it's a boat, but they're just like subject to the whims of nature. Yeah. And like one point they're like almost like they can see land, but then like the ice flow doesn't go towards it. And so they have to make other plans. And they're like dragging these like 3 boats along too, like 22-foot long boats. Which I don't get an idea of like how big they are, but that like the amount of stuff they have with them and people. And sometimes they're talking about like going underneath the boat. I'm like, how big are these things? And I have no idea, but they're significant. And
well, the main one they used, the James Caird, which was a boat, but it had you could run sails up it. It had two small masts. Yeah. And it was 22 feet long. Okay. And I forget what it weighed. I think with ballast in it, I think it weighed like 3 tons. But that's like throwing rocks in the bottom just so it doesn't flip over. That's what ballast does. Because I remember the guys had to like take the ballast out to get it onto the shore so it didn't wash away at night, and it's like everyone hated that because they had to take like a ton of stones out of them, and they were freezing and they didn't have gloves, and it was just like, oh my god.
But yeah, there's the saddest part is when they basically have to kill all the sled dog teams.
Yeah. And then they write in the book though, it's like, but they taste wonderful.
Well, yeah, they just kill like the first 3 sled dog teams, but they have one left over, and the one that's left over they kill and like skin them and like eat it, and they're like, oh, this tastes way better than all the other stuff.
Yeah, and you're eating a dog that has essentially been starving as much as you, and it's like, oh, this tastes wonderful. It's like, oh, these guys are.
But yeah, they basically just kill the dogs because they can't feed everybody, so because they're starting to run out of food, and or they're like. They're not only like necessarily running out of food, but they're just worried about like, we don't want to get to that point where we don't have options. So they're just trying to keep their options open.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The threat of everyone wrote in their diaries, the fear of starvation and cannibalism was like, it drove these guys because other expeditions like this and are in different areas of what, a lot of them where nobody lived or 1 or 2 people lived. It's like, oh yeah, there was like cannibalism and all that stuff. And they're in a world basically sans any resources. Like there's no trees to build anything out of. There's no grass growing. There's that you can't like harvest wheat. It's just nothing. It's just a frozen wasteland. I'm surprised Frostbite didn't like claim more limbs in this, but you never.
There's only one guy that had like his foot amputated, but that was it. I mean, I'm pretty sure the other people like. I'm pretty sure their limbs were fucked up for the rest of their lives, but they're probably still usable. But they also said like the amount of dedication they had to like just keep their limbs moving so they didn't succumb to frostbite is like agonizingly terrifying. Like I had to keep my toes moving the whole time. It's like, you mean like 24 hours you're keeping your toes moving so they don't fall off? It's like, Jesus Christ. Yep. And you're not sleeping, and you're in a boat, and you're being sloshed with water. It's like. These guys should have died so many times.
Yeah, the fact that like, well, they started off with 27 people and then they had a stowaway, so it ended up being 28 people. Yeah, and they did have some people that didn't get along with each other. There was one guy in particular, I think it was their Irish carpenter. They described him as being ill-tempered.
Yeah. Well, was that the guy that everybody hated, but they decided he was without malice though, so he was basically harmless. He was just
He
kind of
just
annoying.
had a horrible personality, but he could like build stuff by looking at it and never taking a measure. It's like, okay, we got to keep this guy alive. Don't have long conversations with him because he's an asshole. But he wasn't like a belligerent asshole. He's just like, he'd be, how's it going today? Well, how the fuck do you think it's going? You know, one of those guys. It's like, all right.
Yeah, a lot of these guys are like.
Job.
Also, a lot of these guys were like kind of way older than I thought they would be.
Yeah,
there was that one guy who was like, he's basically like a muscle man. He's like 56 and he was built like a tank. It's like, I wasn't expecting that at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
Eventually, like they kind of like are crossing flows and stuff, and they eventually find an island, but they're like are navigating at night, and some of the boats get split up, and then like they accidentally find each other like on the island. But then they have to leave the island because they're like looking at the island, and they're like, oh wait, the tide. Basically, like if you can see where the tide comes in, goes out, and it's like, oh, there's basically no island once the tide comes in.
Yeah.
So we can't go. So they have to go to another island, and then at some point, Shackleton and his team are basically going out to, like, put their boat out in the middle of like where whaling ships might be, so they can get help.
Yeah.
And so they're gone for a long time. And the other team's just on an island, trying to make it, and then like it's a really long time. They're like, oh, I guess we should just give up hope. And they talk about they're going to move somewhere, but then that's when they just kind of cut to the other Shackleton's part of it, where he finds a ship, and then they're like, but they can't just
town.
Oh, he finds it.
Remember, they walk across land.
Oh yeah.
And they say the land is like, oh, you can easily walk to the halfway point, and then it's like mountains if they were made out of daggers. And they had to climb over that. Remember, they slid down the other side on their butts?
Yeah.
And it was the guy said it was the longest 100 seconds of my life, because they literally were probably at like terminal velocity almost going down this sheer cliff. Because they're like, what if it ends in like a crevasse or something, and we fall to the bottom of it? It's like, well, it's the only way we're getting there. Because Shackleton had this weird. The thing that is most notable is his like leadership skills were amazing.
Yeah.
And you see pictures of this guy, he literally looks like Captain Kirk. Like, it's like, oh yeah, you'd follow this guy to the end of the earth. He's handsome. He never, never really gets angry or breaks his spirit. I mean, it happens a few times when he gets angry with people.
But they kind of talk about him internally being like he's always constantly on edge, trying to figure out like trying to micromanage everything and like how he can get out and thinking of alternative solutions to things. But outwardly, like other people are talking about him as being like way too optimistic. Like, we're all gonna die. Why are you saying we're all gonna live? But that kind of just kept the crew's morale up and stuff. So
yeah,
it's like, well, fuck, if he believes in this, I guess what are we gonna do? Not believe it? But as soon as they find people, they can't immediately go get the other guys. There's like 3 different like attempts to go get the other guys.
Yeah, Shackleton has to keep renting boats that really aren't designed for that, because the boats that are, it's like, well, we're whaling, we're making money. I mean, your guys are dead. Why? No, he wouldn't. He's like, no, I'm not leaving them there. I'm not leaving them there. So yeah, it took like 3 months. I think it was something crazy before they, because they tried 3 different times, and the last time they finally got to him. But when they did, it's.
And this whole kind of thing takes place over like almost like 2 years, right? Or how long does it take?
Let's see. Because
I know they cross 1 year, or at least they get into the new year, but it seems like way longer. But I can't remember like the time period that they're there.
1914 to 1917.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it went on. It was a lot of time passed there. But they were just literally eating their way across the land.
Yeah.
So, but I think, like, I don't know when that 1917, because like I said, it took a long time to rescue the guys they left behind. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was an amazing story about people. It's considered the last historic age of exploration on the world. Like they don't, yeah, it's called the heroic age of exploration. Like it's the end of it. Like because we really don't do things like this anymore. There's people that went into the Amazon and stuff, but we don't go anywhere where there's like nothing for us to exploit.
Yeah. We threw a satellite over it. There's nothing there.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, this is where the thing happened too. Because we do have research stations down there, but it's all science. And now pretty soon, like in 50 years, it'll be like a beach. Like you just hang out there. It's like be the only place in the world where the temperature is not 150 if you listen to some of the darker predictions.
What was that? Crap! I was something about exploration. Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, they found the ship, like sunk some down there, and they made efforts to like bring it up from the bottom of the ocean, but like
but the iceberg screwed them too.
Yeah,
it was. I saw the series on National Geographic. Yeah, the ship, was fully modern steel ship that could hover, that had satellite access and GPS. Yeah, they almost got crushed by icebergs. They're like, they just marked where it was and had to leave because, of course, it cost millions of dollars to launch that expedition.
And just the frightening stuff with the ice flows and stuff like that, because they're basically an ice flow. I mean, an ice flow is basically just like a sheet of ice that's like 6 feet thick, or what they talk about. But they're like, maybe we should get on a berg, which is talking about iceberg, and it's like, yeah, but if it melts on one side and flips, we're all dead.
Yeah. And they also described like when those things crash together, it's like dynamite. It's like there's so much force going on there. Like you don't want to be on the one that gets crushed. And
or when an iceberg flips and the wave it creates, and
yeah, it's just nightmare fuel just thinking about what these guys went through.
Yeah.
And the fact that they didn't die was like no one died.
They're just constantly wet, tired, and hungry.
Yep.
For almost 3 years straight.
And then, like the camp where they left the guys at, they figured out it's like, oh, there's like because of the heat in the tent, like we have to bail out the camp because it's just all water because all the ice melted away because of the heat of the tent, and it's just like a rock bottom to this thing, but it floods with water because they got ovens running in there and stuff, and it's like, oh my god. These guys must have smelled like a 30-year-old corpse by the time they found them.
Yeah, they couldn't. Yeah, because there's no bathing, so
no, there's no bathing going on.
Constant diarrhea.
Well, I like the way they described it because this was from a more gentler age. They were talking about eating seal meat and seal blubber all the time, and I guess like in real life, like that causes like explosive flatulence. Like it's really eating like that's just a pure protein diet.
Yeah.
And your body's just breaking that down, and especially they're in their extreme circumstances too. And I guess seal meat is like not that rich, like it's not a lot of calories, and when you're trying to stay warm, you just burn a lot of calories. And they said, they were talking about it, but they referred to it in like the way English gentlemen would at this time. It's like, oh, the flatulence is unbearable. And that's kind of like just left there. But then I go look up seal meat flatulence, because it's on the internet. Oh, yeah. You'd be sleeping in a tent with guys, everyone just farting their head off. Probably to the point it's like, is this tent going to explode?
Who started the motor engine? Like, just guys farting all night. All right, for the other crazy one is they kill like a sea lion, and there's like undigested fish in it. It's like, cool, free meat.
Yeah, it's like extra meat. And the sea lion almost kills the guy that's trying to, because sea lions they're huge. No, this was an elephant seal they killed.
Okay, yeah, there's like 3 different. There's like crab eater seals, sea lions, penguins,
elephant seals.
Yeah, elephant seals. Yeah,
because they're massive. They're just it's like a cow that can kill you.
Yeah, they say there are 1,000 pounds, and when they kill one, it's like there's 1,000 pounds of meat for us. So.
Oh, and there's free fish inside it. It's like, oh god, where do your standards go?
I remember they're also like afraid of killer whales. I remember every time they're on the sea, they were definitely afraid that a killer whale is going to come by and flip the ship and eat them. But
yeah,
which I don't think killer whales eat people, but maybe they'll eat anything.
Yeah,
I know they do terrible things to seals, but as far as I know, like they don't like really treat people like that. But I don't know.
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
don't want to have problems with them.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a reason they call them killer whales. But I remember that being kind of a misnomer. But
well, I like all these like Norwegian guys that are just hanging out down there because they're just seal hunters, and they're giving the advice to Shackleton about, because he's asking him like, what about icebergs and stuff? It's like, well, we don't go where the icebergs are because they'll just crush the ship. Oh, so we're trying to go across Antarctica. It's like, well, your ship's just going to get crushed. We don't mess around with those. We just hunt seals. And this was the age of like, I think they were still like throwing harpoons at seals. I don't know if they had the seal harpoon or the whale harpoon cannon yet.
I remember one of the crazy plans they had is like they're trying to reach one island they know of where there's just like some buildings there that like whalers occasionally use, and like they're gonna take apart the church and make a boat out of it.
Yeah. Yep. I remember. Yeah, that was a plan, but they couldn't get there.
No,
because they were just pretty much, at the whim of the sea. I mean, they had an excellent navigator too.
Yeah,
that was the one thing they had. Is this guy kept all his maps the whole time and most of his navigational equipment? Because I remember they would light a match real quick and try to hold their hands over it so he could get a bearing. And then Shackleton was talking to him, and he's like, "So how close do you think you are?" And he says, "Well, James, this equipment has to be recalibrated every so often, and I've been carrying it like on my back across, so I don't know. We could be 1 to 2 degrees off, and I can't give you like that accurate a reading." But yeah, that was
a guy who like sat in the same position for like 6 days straight.
Yep.
And they had to like basically like manually move him so he could get blood flowing back into his extremities.
Yeah, if you sat down if you did strenuous activity, they said, like the guys that they left behind that were trying to build a better structure, if you did strenuous activities even for an hour and you sat down for 10 minutes, you could get so stiff, your legs would get so stiff that guys had to pick you up. And it's just like, I can't imagine.
Or like, and actually like the rowing they did, like some people were looking forward to it because it meant that they could get blood in their extremities.
Yeah. Yeah, anything to get the blood moving. So yeah, it's a great book. Everyone should read it. I didn't realize how old a book it was until I looked it up. It's like, oh wow. And this guy, the guy who wrote this book, his name is Alfred Lansing. Essentially, the only other stuff he wrote was like technical journals.
Huh.
So that was he wrote a book about drugs, and that was it. That's all in his bibliography, and it was basically like a doctor's guide to drugs. So, so I don't know. He seemed to,
maybe some academic for college.
Yeah, he just took all these diaries and wove the story together. His book's very well written. It doesn't. It keeps your interest the whole time.
We watched a movie this week.
Yes.
A very weird movie.
Very strange movie indeed.
Peter Weir's The Plumber.
Yes.
Peter Weir, who did things like The Truman Show. But yeah, this is like an Australian TV movie.
Yeah.
I picked it because it said it was a dark comedy. It's like, I don't really get comedy from this, but I guess there's some weird things that it could be comedic, but this is really good. If this is a comedy, it's a super dark comedy because it's more of like a horror story than a comedy.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that like, when I saw like dark comedy or whatever, and then I watched it, it's like, maybe that's how they pitched it. Or maybe they think this is funny because the main character, the plumber,
yeah.
He does a lot of Max. He does a lot of weird things, and when he started really getting into the repair of this woman's shower, it's like, this is like Brazil. It's like, what kind of weird arrangement is this where this guy just shows up and he's like, I got to do some work, and it's just like never-ending job.
Well, the movie I can compare this to is The Cable Guy,
Yeah.
where it's like someone who just kind of gets invited in for innocuous reasons, just work, and then they're just like invite themselves into every aspect of their life.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what's going on here. But like, I didn't really like The Cable Guy either. I thought that was just too weird of a dark comedy, also. But here
Yeah.
it's even weirder.
Yeah, this seems to be a movie that has like elements of like class warfare in it.
Yeah, yeah. There's like weird a lot of things that like people are debating things. It's like, oh, they're talking about that then, we're still talking about that now. That's weird.
Well, doing research for this movie led me down a weird rabbit hole of articles and videos written by people, if Australians, talking about this, and this is kind of seen as like part of what they call Australian New Wave, and some people say it isn't. But this is I learned everything about the premiership of their Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser, because when he took over, they kind of had a guy as Prime Minister before him that was like their Nixon, who tried to do a lot of illegal stuff in Parliament to make sure that he got his party in, and he's the only Prime Minister that was dismissed. Well, this guy Malcolm Fraser is the guy who came after that guy. And if you want to know about it, read the Australian constitutional crisis in 1973, if that interests you. I'm not going to go into it, but essentially this guy came in and he was from the Liberal Party, and he had this thing where, and also this was one of the wealthiest, this was the time of largest economic growth in Australian history, like starting with this guy's premiership until like in the mid 80s when he left. And he was really into the arts, and so he started funding like all these because this movie was made by the Australian government. Essentially, they gave funding to make it, like through the arts programs and stuff.
Yeah.
That's where this came from, and so it was released on TV over there. Whereas here we see it as a movie, but
I mean, it's only like 70 minutes long, so it's very short.
But this was a period when like the Australian film schools really got big, and they said like at one point in Australia they were spending more money to train a film director than they were a fighter pilot in an airplane. Like they really got into film during this, and the arts in general, but especially film during this time in Australian history. And Peter Weir and some of those guys kind of came out of that system, and that's where we get this movie, which is kind of a weird mess of a story where.
Well, yeah, the thing is, like, you just don't know what this guy never gives any reason why he's there.
No,
he's breaking more things than he's fixing. You're under the guise that he's stealing things. Because he mentions that he went to jail for stealing and possibly rape, and also maybe that never happened at all. And he like tries to gaslight her at some point. It's like, I didn't go to jail.
Yeah,
he has this weird thing where it's like tradesmen are like treated as lesser people or something.
Yeah, because this tower, this building block they live in, which I didn't understand what was going on at first. I was like, well, just fire this guy. Why did you hire him? And it's like, oh no, they're in some kind of university housing.
Yeah. And
he's like the pipe fitter or whatever for that complex. And it's like, oh, they can't really fire this guy because fixing the pipes, I guess, is part of their lease agreement or something. So this is the guy you got. Because we have like a university professor of medicine. His name's Brian. And then the main lady in the story, Jill, like she's getting her master's degree in anthropology or something.
Yeah. And she's she's working on her thesis or whatever.
Yeah. So these are like really educated, like upper middle class people in Australian society.
Yeah.
Max the plumber, he you never know if he's messing with her. It's like, because he's like, I know people think I'm stupid, and he says things like, I want to be a folk singer like Dylan or something, but then he like actually sings a song in the middle of the movie, and it's terrible.
Well, yeah, there's a part where he kind of like leans in closer and he goes, I'm not a plumber, and it's kind of like her worst fears, like, what is this guy? And he's like, no, I'm a folk singer. And it's like he throws things off. So a lot of these like weird misdirects.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very it's a strange movie where it's like, oh, is this guy just like some kind of rapist psycho? Is that where this is going? And it's like, no, not really. He's just someone who either wants people to pay attention to him or really wants to mess with these people because he thinks it's witty and fun. I don't know.
And he doesn't seem to be good at his job.
No. Seems to be very destructive. I like when he's like, oh, I got to fix the pipes. And he just takes a hammer and chisel out and just starts chiseling all their tile out, which is like, I don't know. Maybe that's how you do that. It seems like. But of course, these people wouldn't know because they're so abstracted from work or anything like that. They're like, yeah, I guess he's got to do his job.
Yeah. And there's kind of a weird thing, like whenever they go outside, there's just like this very obvious like wind blowing thing. And I know there's like a thing because there's like I'm not sure where it is. It's in Adelaide. I'm not sure where that is in Australia, but I know like with New Zealand, they're on like the 50th parallel or something like that. And it's just like this, it's part of the earth where it's just a constant gust of wind that's like 50 miles an hour no matter what. It's just always constantly going. So I don't know if there's like something like that going on here. Yeah, because whenever they go outside, it's just kind of this weird, like a post-apocalyptic sound whooshing.
Yeah.
Of the wind. Yeah, and the one doctor, he's getting like offers from Geneva to go do his research in Geneva. Because he's like talking about like the New Guineas, and there's like a spongiform encephalopathy kind of mad cow disease going down there because people
what happens if you practice cannibalism too much.
Yeah, or eating people's brains. But he's also talking about like the people down there, like the abundance of junk food is too much of a enticing than like fresh food, and it's just cheaper to have junk foods. And like all the people, all their diets are constantly changing. People are just getting fatter and weaker.
Sound familiar, anyone?
And then people don't want to bring fresh food there because it's just too expensive. So
yeah. Yeah, it seems like the husband's just out to lunch. Like he's totally checked out because she tries to tell him a few times. It's like, this guy's a maniac. He's like, are you on about the plumber again? He's like, I got to meet people from the World Health Organization. And
and there's the neighbor who's just kind of, anytime she's like with like her husband or her neighbor, like Max seems to be okay. But it's anytime it's like they're alone together, he's just super weird about everything.
Yeah.
And there's that weird part where like she just ignores him, and then like he breaks his way into the apartment like through like the ceiling tiles. And
yeah, that's when I started thinking is this Brazil?
I took the
tradesman's. Yeah. Just came in through a hole in the roof, which he references earlier because they make him walk in the back. Yeah. So the well-heeled university people don't have to see his dirty self. Or he said there's all kinds of like hints of class struggle in this.
Yeah. And of course she doesn't like immediately run away. She's just like, well, I guess he came in through the ceiling.
Yeah, why not? I'm going to go study my chanting stuff. Oh, I like it when they go to like they have some woo-woo class in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
Where they have to rent their like onesies,
leotards,
yeah, and I don't know what they're doing.
Oh, it's just some sort of like realign your chakra stuff or whatever.
Oh yeah, well, it's okay. It's a bunch of woo woo shit.
Yeah,
and I like at the end of it, like they're like smoking and drinking wine. It's like, yeah, this seems healthy.
And then the guys who want to use the hall next to her, like, and say, "Hey, get out of here, ladies! We got to do some real stuff.
Get out of here, you hens! It's time for the men to speak."
And then at the end, she got this expensive watch from her husband, and then she like puts it in her purse, and then she sees his truck downstairs, and she basically plants things in there to make it look like he was stealing stuff. And there is a part where like he has something in his bag that you think is like one of the priceless artifacts. Because while he's in there, he's constantly like evaluating out loud. It's like, that's expensive, right?
Yeah. He says very weird things to her, but only when she's alone with him.
Yeah. He even talked about like when he was a kid, he got in trouble for pretending to be a plumber and robbing places. It's like, yeah, okay. You don't know how to take that. It's like, is that true or not? Well, then there's also the point where like she goes downstairs to talk to like some lady who's like apparently like in charge of things or related to it, and she knows Max, and that's where she's just kind of like, oh, nobody's on my side.
Yeah.
And then she plants the evidence and to make it look like he stole things from her house. And I like when she's talking to the husband, she doesn't say like she just like, oh, my watch is gone. We looked for it for an hour. She never directly says like, I think the plumber took it. She just lets him arrive to that conclusion. So it seems more natural when he gets pinned for it.
Yeah. And she's just staring at him from the balcony, and like 50 stories up or however high it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
But she's just like staring, looking down at him. And by the way, she's dressed like, she looks like beautiful in this last scene. Like she puts on her best makeup, her best clothes.
And they eat avocados for dinner.
Yeah.
Nothing on it. Just avocado cut in half. You know, it's a delicacy.
Yeah. I thought that was kind of weird too, but some people said that was a reference to her having his testicles and controlling him. I don't know. Some people really look into this movie, and then other people laugh at people that look into this movie. Yeah. It's like, there's no message here. It's just a weird story. Stop. Yeah. You know, you're getting up your own ass, and I don't know where to be on that. Like I said, it definitely. I'm not going to say I love this movie and like, oh, go out and watch it. But it's like, well, I learned more about Australian politics in the 70s than I ever knew by researching this movie, and not really anything having to do with the themes discussed in this movie, but why it got made. Yeah. And it was basically like, do these 3 things for us, and then we'll do some other stuff for you to get money later. So, it was kind of, it's an odd duck of a movie. Yeah. But she's looking down on the poor, downtrodden working man at the end of the movie from her high tower, seeing him get arrested, and she set him up. He actually didn't steal that stuff. Yeah. Now all the other psycho stuff he did before that was clearly wrong, but it was all psychological.
I actually thought the movie was going to go further. I thought she was going to have killed Max at some point.
That's with a pipe or something like metaphoric, but no. Yeah, this is an oddball movie, but I'm glad I watched it, but I'm not gonna watch this 12 more times and see what. I'm not gonna. I mean, it's short. I never heard of it before. I was hoping it was gonna be a dark comedy like it advertised itself, instead of just a weird dark movie. Yeah, it's darkly comedic, but it's not like funny. Like no characters delivering funny dialogue. And like I said, the interstitial scenes with her husband, or her out with her husband, and then like the weird low-level racism about making curry for the guy, for the black character from the WHO, and she's like, I've never made curry for one of those, and then everyone's just like, oh, okay, I was like, what is she saying? Because she's studying like tribal stuff for her master's. She always got like weird tribal chants playing, and she tells the story about a tribesman who came into her tent uninvited once, and he was like in a trance, and she's like, I didn't want to move, but I got him out by throwing goat's milk on him. It's like, is that a metaphor about what this situation is going to become? But no, it's not. It's just a weird story she tells. This just seemed to be, at the end of the day, all this movie was about people completely involved in their own lives, to the benefit of no one.
Yeah, Max has a coat that says "liberal equals less taxes" on it. Yeah. I guess reading some trivia said that Peter Weir based this on like a plumber he had come in who just seemed to be bad at his job and had to constantly, and he was just annoying and wanted to be like friendly.
Your best friend. Yeah. I love those.
And then they kind of combined it with this cab driver who he looked like a hippie, but then he had like kind of like counter ideals to what like a hippie would have. He seemed to be like a fascist and pro-war and stuff like that, but he had all these like hippie accoutrements and like aesthetics to him, and so he just like flip on a dime what he believed, and he seemed to believe in anything. So that's where he created like kind of a bad tradesman who is like contradictory values at all times.
Yeah, who some people think is funny and charming, like his supervisor at the apartment block. It's like, oh yeah, I know Max. He's great. But yeah. So if you want to check out, there's better movies in Australian New Wave than this one. Like I said, this isn't bad. It's a very claustrophobic movie.
Yeah, there's like 3 locations.
Yeah, it does give you a sense of like mental illness abounds. Like it does hammer that home. But
Well, I mean, it seems like a stage play, so I think
a lot of people said this could very easily be a play.
So I think there's a lot of meant to like you're kind of supposed to bring your own stuff to it, and the things we found interesting is just being like, what was going on in Australia at this time?
Yeah. Let's learn more about the Fraser premiership.
But Criterion Collection, they just added a new kind of section for January, so they have French New Wave on there. So
Cool.
So we might check out some French New Wave stuff.
That's always fun. The French are an endlessly fascinating people to me. What will they? Because it's almost familiar and totally alien at the same time. It's like, oh, this is like Western civilization, but then it's like, oh, but it's French, so it's got a weird vibe, which makes it cool. Well, that's all I got for this week.
All right.
So this week for the American Greed Factory podcast, this is Nathan.
This is Scotland. Goodbye, America.